Welcome to Tales from the Library, a Sanctuary First book club. Let's Go to Golgotha by Garry Kilworth. The time travel agency was the third room along one of the branches of the Banyan building. It was a long way up, and it took Simon Falk a considerable time to reach the pink glass doors. A notice outside read, "Pan Package Tours offer you the remarkable. This is your chance to see the Battle of Marathon, the Wars of the Roses, the first manned spaceflight, absolutely no personal risk." Simon stared into the interior and then went, reluctantly it seemed, inside. An assistant slid silently to his side the moment he was in the room, with hands clasped before him in deference to his customer. Perhaps he was requesting aid from above, thought Simon, to get him through his potential sale. "Can I help you, sir?" Simon knotted his own fingers behind his back to even the balance and to hint gently that he was not yet ready to buy. "Just some brochures, please. Can I take some away with me to study at leisure?" "Certainly, sir." The fingers unravelled themselves and began deftly plucking multicoloured sheets of paper from the display shelves, with the expertise of a seasoned fruit picker. "When you and your family," Simon finished for him. "Precisely." The words were neat and well cared for, trimmed to the correct length, and each separated by a time pause fitting for the intended effect. "When you have made your minds up," he continued, "perhaps you will give us a call and we will see what can be arranged. There's no need to come personally for the booking." Simon wriggled uncomfortably. "I was just on my way home. I know I could have ordered them by mail, but my wife is impatient." "Yes," the salesman smiled silkily. The coronation of Elizabeth I is fully booked, I'm afraid, and the revolution of Mars has only limited number of seats available." "I don't believe we are too interested in those events," said Simon. "Your first time, sir?" "Yes, as a matter of fact it is." "Then may I recommend the sacking of Carthage? We mingle with the camp followers on a neighbouring slope. However, I must add that it's not for the squeamish." Simon asked, "Isn't that a little dangerous?" No, not as long as you follow our little instructions." The agent wagged a finger playfully. "We've never lost a customer yet." Simon murmured his thanks and almost ran out of the room. He hated these pre-holiday forays, but he owed his family a vacation and they were going to get it. It had to be one of these time tours. He could not afford space travel. There was nothing else to do. Earth was a solid block of brick and concrete, flourishing with banyan buildings. And ocean cruises made his children ill. He stepped out of the building and hailed a floater, avoiding the blast of air purifiers as he crossed the tiled floor to meet it. Mandy was waiting at the door of their flat in the same mantis-like attitude employed by the travel agents. "Did you get the brochures?" He sighed a resigned sigh. "Yes, I got them." She grabbed at the wad. "Wonderful, let me see them." "Oh, don't look so depressed. You know you'll always enjoy it once we get away. A trip through time." She clutched the brochures to her breast. "I'm going to love every minute of it." "Well, I hope it'll be up to your expectations," Simon said dryly. "It's going to cost us enough, and my business is not doing so well as it should." He trailed his sentences over to the cocktail cabinet and made himself a drink. "Oh, Tish," she replied, "a holiday will do you good. You'll come back full of fresh ideas and thoroughly relaxed." She turned over some brochures in her hands. "We don't want anything too violent. It might upset the children." Simon gave a snort. The children would wallow in it. James likes nothing better than the sight of blood, and Julie would rather see a space war picture than a live ballet performance. "Don't be cynical, dear. Anyway, that's all the more reason to get them away," protested Mandy. "They have nothing else to do but play on the rooftop these days." "Nothing else to do?" he cried, overdoing the incredulous tone. "Did I have underground free playgrounds when I was a boy? Did you have—" "Oh, don't start that again. When will you understand that children cannot appreciate what they've always had? Let them see how children lived in our ages, our countries." Mandy paused. Then she continued, "We should have shown them before. Perhaps we should take them to Sparta. Did you know the children of Sparta were placed in military academies at the age of 8 and told to steal food or starve? The crime was getting caught. I wonder what our children would think of the boy that let a fox gnaw on his abdomen rather than let his elders discover he had stolen it and hidden it up his smock." Her blue eyes searched his face for signs of agreement. "They would probably think he was a damn fool, and so do I," Simon replied. She tried again. "Perhaps we should take them to Rome, or Pompeii the day before it erupted, and leave them there." "Don't be nasty. What about the Holy Land?" "At the time of the Crusades," finished 12-year-old James, who had entered the kitchen eating.
Not before your dinner, James, complained his mother. Your father and I will decide where we're going. Go and wash your hands. Where's Julie? She's coming. That evening, Simon and Mandy Fox sat at the table poring over brochures and fighting over places, prices and dates, until the front door sang softly, telling them that their closest friends were waiting to enter the house. Simon pressed a switch and shortly afterwards, Harry and Sarah Talbot entered the room. "Hello, hello, holiday time again," chirped Harry, unzipping his outerwear suit. Simon smiled and scratched the bridge of his nose. "Yep, we can't decide on where to go. Or should I say, when to go? It's a bit confusing." "If you're talking about time tours, why don't you come with us? We're going to see the Crucifixion," said Sarah, with a little flick of her head. "The what?" cried the Fox together. "The Crucifixion of Christ," said Harry nonchalantly. He became earnest. "You see, we thought the children needed to see exactly what happened so they had a real understanding of religion and what it means. You know what children are like." "We know," said Simon in a hollow tone. Sarah continued. "If they could see exactly how Jesus died to save us, or our souls, or whatever it was he saved, it might have a profound effect on them. At least, we hope it will." Simon began mixing the drinks. "Isn't it a bit sacrilegious?" he said quietly. "I mean, after all." Harry spoke again. "Well, I suppose on the surface it does seem a bit ghoulish and bloodthirsty, but as long as one goes with the right attitude, I think it's all right. As long as one bears in mind what one's there for." Mandy said, "Do you know, that is exactly what I was thinking before you came over. Wasn't I, Simon?" "Yes, I'm a mind reader," he winked at Harry. Mandy ignored him. "We are drawing too far away from the things that matter in life, like religion." "You've not mentioned going to church in 10 years, scoffed Simon. Mandy dismissed this remark with a flick of her hand. "That's not important," she retorted. "A pack of old men droning about the scriptures is not religion. I want to see the real thing. I think we should go, Simon." Thus it was decided by Mandy and Sarah. Simon, his family and their friends were going to see the crucifixion. At modest package tour prices, of course. Pan Time Tours Limited had its offices in Southend High Square. The Fox and the Talbots shared a floater to the pre-tour lecture to economise on the fare. The day was unusually bright for the season, and in the floater, protected from the fresh sea breeze, they were warm and excited. Simon always felt good on the day when the sun managed to cut its way through the layers of cloud, and he could see it twinkling on the giant floating platform that launched the spaceships high above the sky. He had never been into space. Simon Falk was secretly a confirmed homebody. They reached the small lecture hall and took seats inside. Simon looked around him. "There's quite a few people here," he whispered to Harry. "Do you think they're all on our tour?" "Must be," said Harry. "There's no other lecture booked for today." "Can I have your attention, please?" A young, serious-looking clergyman stood over the small rostrum before them. The murmuring died down. The vicar was a short man with old-fashioned glass spectacles. It was an affectation of the clergy. His glasses flashed like metal discs in the sunlight that fell in strips down the east side of the hall. "First of all, welcome to Pan Time Tours. I am one of your preparation officers, and I am here to give you advice on what to expect and how you must conduct yourselves." He smiled. "We do not lay down any rules, but it is important you should know how to act because on this tour, as many others, you will be mixing with the locals. You must be inconspicuous. This is the primary rule." One or two hands shot up, but the clergyman waved them down. "Now I know a lot of you have questions, but I must ask you to be patient. We will give you time at the termination of the lecture to get your queries answered. Many of them will probably be dealt with as the lecture continues. We have done all this before." He looked up and smiled again. The sunlight from the window struck his left cheek, smearing it with holy gold, and the audience settled comfortably into their soft chairs. "You will all be issued with the appropriate clothing before you embark, and everyone will go through our treatment room to ensure their outward appearance does not clash with that of the natives. This is a perfectly harmless process and is easily reversible on return from your holiday. We can't have any giant Nordic blondes standing out like poorly disguised Vikings at a Ramadan feast. A few days before the trip, you will all be invited to visit our language laboratory by the knowledge injection principle during one afternoon. As you probably know, the knowledge will only last about a month before it disappears completely from your brains. We can't stuff it in 2 or 3 hours and expect it to remain there, otherwise we would all be brilliant." He gave a soft snigger. "Can I be a Roman soldier?" a spotty-faced youth shouted from behind Simon. The clergyman reproved the caller with a stern finger and said gravely, "Sir, I did warn you not to ask questions until the end. You'll be given ample opportunity then. However, I will give you a reply because I was shortly coming to the importance of being Hebrews. The tour needs to stay together. A Roman soldier or two tagging along behind civilians will not look right, and besides, occupation troops have commitments. They might be recalled to the barracks at short notice. You might be stopped for dirty buttons or something. A soldier is too vulnerable. Apart from all this, soldiers act in a particular fashion and have gestures and phrases peculiar to their profession. We would be sure to give ourselves away. Take it from me that we need to go as civilians. I don't want to be a Jew, muttered James. Simon nudged him to be quiet. The speaker continued. Now this last part is important, and I shall understand if any of you wish to drop out. If you do, only at this juncture mind you, your deposit money will be refunded. If any of you are thrown in prison for any reason, we might not be able to get you out in time. That is, before you disappear into the bowels of a slave gallery or end up in the bottom of a stoning pit. There was a loud shuffling of feet and muttering of voices from his audience. He waited and bowed his head until it had ceased. There is no risk, he continued, providing you do exactly as you're told. I cannot stress the importance of this too much. You know what happened and how it happened. We will arrive on the day that Pilate asks the inhabitants of Jerusalem who he should set free, as the citizens are permitted to grant amnesty to one prisoner over the feast of the Passover. When the crowd begins to shout Barabbas, as you know it must, then you must shout it too. You must not appear to be different in any way from the rest of the citizens. This is vitally important. You have to appear to be in agreement with the rest of the crowd. You must jeer at Christ and shake your fists as he drags the cross through the streets. You must remember that communities in those times were not very large, and if a small selection of people is silent, the others will begin to wonder why and will question you. You will be sure to give yourselves away under stress, not because you are idiots, but because you are clever. People in those times were simple. They followed the ringleaders, and they will regard anyone who does not with great suspicion. It is far more difficult than you think to speak with simplicity under pressure than it is in reverse. So do as I say, and everyone will be perfectly safe. It may be distasteful and even repugnant to your nature, but it is necessity. When they nail up the sign, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, you must laugh. Those that remain awestruck while the rest of the crowd are dancing and prancing, screaming and shouting, will only draw attention to themselves by their silence. I repeat, it is for your own safety. Now, are there any questions? The sermon was at an end. Only 2 childless couples asked for a refund of their deposit. How could they do that? Asked Julie for about the 5th time just before they left for Jerusalem. How could they crucify him? His own people. The same people that cheered and threw palm leaves before his feet such a short time before. It's like giving someone a ticker tape parade and then hanging him. I don't suppose that is known either, replied Simon. The children, after their initial reluctance to enjoy the holiday plans, had settled down to the idea and had been studying their Bibles. Don't forget what the man said, they were very simple people. Simon was pleased with Julie. She was going with the right objectives in mind, to study the people who had executed Christ and to attempt to analyse their motives. Julie went on, I can't believe they had to do it. I know Christ had to die to save us all from sin, but it was mankind that was to blame. You must think in general terms. You can't blame individual nations like Romans or the Jews. Well, I still think it's terrible the way they treated him. Yes, Simon was well pleased with Julie. He was not too sure about James yet. James was a deeper one than Julie and had to be plumbed over a longer period of time than had been available. The treatment room, as promised, was painless, and the journey itself was almost a delight. It left you with a slight dizzy feeling, but if you kept your eyes closed, the sensation was that of sliding down a seemingly endless helter-skelter. There really was nothing to it. When Simon opened his eyes, he found himself sitting on warm sand beside a narrow goat track. The others were in the positions they had held in the tiny room. They all climbed to their feet and made their way along the goat track towards the town that shimmered in the heat in the distance. The sun pressed hot on the backs of their necks, and Simon put an arm out around James to stop him from stumbling. None of them were used to walking on uneven ground, covered in sharp stones. Simon felt sorry for some of the older members of the party. The courier entered the town first. He was recognisable by his matted hair, rags, and the ancient staff he carried, but no one was to speak to him except in dire emergency. The walk was a long one, and the rough smocks were uncomfortable. Several children were beginning to complain of the heat, and that their skins were sore where their cloth was rubbing, but there was a general atmosphere of excitement pervading the adults. At least we look authentic enough, thought Simon. The smocks and sandals were genuine, bought on a previous trip by a tour preparation officer. Some of the members had elected to go barefoot at the request of the firm. Their feet had been hardened during the process in the treatment room. Nevertheless, thought Simon, they will be raw by the time we go back. Presumably, pan-time tours relied on the suffering of Christ to overawe the visitors and make them ashamed of their own trivial problems. A dog ran in and out of their legs, barking as they trailed down a narrow, dusty street. Their first meeting with one of the locals. Simon glanced at Mandy. Her new brown eyes flashed at him, and she looked very beautiful in a gypsy-ish sort of way. "Glad you came?" she whispered in Hebrew. "I don't know yet," he said in all seriousness. Finally, they passed between some hard mud dwellings and out into a square in the middle of the town. "Just in time," said the courier. "Spread out, everyone." The mob was dense, but Harry procured a clear place just inside the periphery of the crowd. A tall, thin man with an intelligent face was addressing the people from the steps of the stone building. He looked harassed and a little ill. He was speaking in Latin. "What is he saying?" whispered Simon to Harry, who had studied the classics in his youth. "He's asking us to choose the one to go free," answered Harry. "You know, you've read the book." "Oh," said Simon. The crowd shuffled but remained silent. A fly settled on the end of Simon's perspiring nose, and he flicked it away impatiently. God, it was hot, he thought. The Roman repeated his previous sentence. Suddenly, as if he had just comprehended the question, James cried out, "Barabbas!" in a high voice. He had been daydreaming, and the question, as did many questions in Latin in the classroom at school, had taken him off guard. The sound echoed over the hard, baked square, and James looked a little frightened at his outburst. Then the mutterings of the crowd began, and soon everyone was yelling, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" Simon felt relieved that the shouting had started. He had been startled by his son's yell, and was afraid that the attention had been drawn to them. No one was looking at them, however. "What did you do that for?" he hissed under the uproar. James was nervous and tense. "I'm sorry. I thought we were supposed to. He asked us. The man said, I don't know." "Never mind," intervened Harry. "It would have happened anyway. You just jumped the gun, that's all. Don't do it again, though, or we may be in trouble." James looked miserable, but Simon let it go at that. There was no sense in causing a scene, and what was done was done. They stood for about an hour in the square, with none of them quite sure what was happening, and then Julie said she felt sick. Simon and Mandy took her behind one of the straw brick houses, leaving James with Harry and Sarah and their children. "It must be the heat," said Mandy after a while. "It's getting at me a bit too. Couldn't we sit down somewhere in the shade?" She looked down the narrow street for somewhere to rest, but there was nothing in view. Then, having an idea, she walked over to one of the houses and looked in from the open doorway. A Hebrew family was sitting on stools in the middle of the room, with their hands clasped in front of them. The old man of the group raised his eyes inquiringly. It was cool in the doorway, but it was obvious that she was intruding on something very private. "Sorry," said Mandy, and stepped back into the street. The heat from the ground came up through the soles of her sandals again, and she walked on to the next house. It was also occupied. So was the next, and the next. She returned to where Simon and Julie stood. "There's something funny here," she whispered to Simon when she reached him. "The houses have people in them." "So?" said Simon in an irritated tone. "Well, one would think that they would be out on a day like today. Why aren't they watching Christ pull his cross through the streets? All the other inhabitants are." "Perhaps they are... well, I don't know. What's the point?" Then he looked thoughtful. "You know, you have something there. Let's check a few more houses." They went from house to house, through dozens of streets, peering into doorways, looking through curtains until they knew they had covered a large portion of the town, enough to know that there was something terribly wrong. The realization of what was wrong began to sink in very rapidly, and no matter how hard Simon's mind tried to reject it or concoct excuses to cover it, the awful thought remained. Julie followed her agitated parents, not understanding and obviously unwell. "I want a drink," she finally complained. "Well, you can't have one," snapped Mandy. "The water isn't fit to drink. It's got all sorts of germs in it." "These people are all right," Julie sniffed to deaf ears. Simon felt a hot wave of air pass over his face. His eyes were sore, his mouth felt dry, and the dust was mixing with the sweat on his feet to form a slimy grime between his toes. His physical discomfort, however, was nothing compared to his mental stress. He felt very afraid. "Doesn't it strike you as peculiar that the crowd was so large?" he asked, wiping his brow with his sleeve at the same time. Mandy's voice was taut. "Well, it has been boosted by the time tours from the future. There's more than one agency, don't forget." Simon was visibly trembling now. "There are dozens of agencies," he cried, "and all of the inhabitants of this town are in their houses, praying. Quickly, we've got to find Harry and the others." Simon grabbed Julie and swung her onto his back. They ran through the streets with their perspiration dripping from their eyebrows and their eyes, stinging with the salt and the dust. In the distance, they could hear the crowd chanting and jeering. They could hear the shrieks of laughter and high-pitched catcalls. It was an ugly, frightening sound, like a screaming of monkeys as the lion pads beneath their trees. It was the forced laughter of hyenas that circle a lion's den at a safe distance, as the Lord lies uncovered in the warm sun. Then suddenly, there was silence. Simon slowed, gasping for breath. He could see the rut made by the cross snaking along the street and disappearing into the distance. A shudder went through him. "My God," he sobbed to his wife. "We've killed him." A sandal slipped from his foot as he ran, but he disregarded it. He felt none of the sharp stones that cut his soles and heels of his feet. The pair of them stumbled on, following the telltale marks in the dust, until they reached the crowd. The faces were all turned in one direction, and wore expressions of shocked sympathy. Simon did not dare look towards the crosses. He knew he would faint if he did. And he had seen the shadows out the corner of his eye. It was enough. They found Harry and Sarah and the children on the edge of the crowd, as silent and watchful as the others. Sarah's cheeks were blotched with white, and Harry's mouth was half open. "Harry," choked Simon, as quickly as his emotion would allow. "Harry, we've got to get him down." Harry's stunned mind took time to register the fact that Simon was with them once more. He did not take his eyes from the man on the centre cross. Licking his lips, he replied helplessly, "Can't do it, Simon. It's got to happen, you know. This is the way it is, but, my God, I wish we'd never come. He looked at me, you know. I'll never forget his eyes as long as I live. They were so..." He paused to find a word. "So deep." Simon was frantic. Harry, look at the crowd. Look around you. There are no Jews here. No natives. The only ones here are us, the holidaymakers. Do you realise the enormity of what we've done? The whole guilt of mankind rests on our shoulders." He was sobbing violently now. "We've crucified the Son of God, and we're going to do it next tour, and the next tour, and the next. Forever and ever. Time without end. Amen," finished Harry humbly. Let's Go to Golgotha by Garry Kilworth.